Well, in this case, I have the opportunity to make an interview with Roberto, who is the president of our National Securities Commission, as known as the regulator, right? Well, honestly, for me, it's great to see how these kind of conversations are happening in these spaces, because at the end of the day, we need institutions to make more and more adoption in crypto. Today, it's becoming normal to see regulators, bankers, and fintechs in these panels sharing their thoughts in these kind of spaces. So, Roberto, thanks again for being here. Let's dive in. Today, we will talk about the VASP registry, or the Proveedores de Servicios de Activos Virtuales registry. So the first question is, how did the idea of creating a formal registry for VASP first emerge?
Bueno, buenos días. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Diego, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. We want to be friendly. let me start by saying that. Long story. I had a life in private practice, and then 2 years ago I became a regulator. And when I became a regulator, CNB, which is a securities regulator here in Argentina, had almost nothing to do with the crypto world. But things happened and something changed along the way. Essentially, Argentina was up for the fourth round of evaluation before the FATF, Financial Action Task Force, GAFI in Spanish. And it needed to comply with a number of things. One of the things it needed to comply was to have the VASPs as a reporting entity for money laundering purposes. Long story short, that resulted in a law being passed, and in that law, CNB was chosen as the regulator. That's not an obvious choice. Many countries use the securities regulators. However, there are countries like Brazil, neighboring Brazil, which uses the central bank, is entitled to regulate the VASPs. That's what happened last week, when eventually, after long consultations, they decided to regulate the VASPs. And it's not the obvious choice in other countries where there are integrated supervisors in which they have all the functions. Or, for example, if you go to El Salvador, that they have their own national commission, or the same, I believe, happens in Dubai with VARA. So we were appointed as regulator. We had to come up with a registry very quickly. In the registry, eventually we registered up to 165 people. The registry was simple, very few data you had to provide. However, if you didn't provide that data, you couldn't operate in Argentina. So eventually from the registry, we moved into a full registration. That took us quite a while. I'm talking about March last year. So eventually in March this year, we passed the final regulation after a few consultations also. And that's an integral regulation of VASP. We think it's a reasonable regulation. And it's kind of friendly, but of course it is a regulation. And currently we have around 100 people registered in the registry, more or less. But that's not a final number because we're still reviewing applications. So that's an ongoing process. But if you want, I stop here and we pick up.
Yep.
I'll stop here and we'll pick up with the next question,
okay,
or should
sure.
I go on?
Yeah,
whatever.
Yeah. Let's talk about the challenges. So what were the main obstacles?
The main obstacles. Imagine a new technology, easy for all of you. Imagine a traditional securities regulator. Imagine traditional actors that look at the digital economy and the digital actors with a lot of disbelief. Disbelief is probably a very gentle word. Imagine again, traditional regulator. We had to quickly adapt to a new world. And worse than that, we had a mandate in the law. The mandate is to regulate VASP using the securities principles, I would say, which are rather harsh. Of course, you have to take care of investor protection and many other things. So we found out that we wanted to have a friendly regulation. We wanted to foster innovation. We certainly didn't want to kill any innovation. And there was a difficult balance to be struck there, in which we had to move from one side to the other. One side being the principles that the law contained to what we wanted to do. But we certainly want to be a regulator which is pro-innovation, pro-technology. So that's we had a clear north of where we wanted to go. And again, remember that one of the things that as a security regulator we have is two contracting principles. On the one hand, we need to develop the market, and then on the other hand, we need to protect investors. So that's a difficult balance, I would say.
Well, we have time for one more question, and it's what impact have you observed so far in the market?
Okay, we saw a lot of interest in Argentina. I think the crypto phenomenon in Argentina preceded us. We didn't invent it or anything like that. Argentina is being crypto for a number of reasons. Among those reasons are exchange controls and a lack of currency. But there are many more reasons, like everywhere else in the world. So we had a large local ecosystem, and our challenge was to bring these players into the regulation, which is what we are striving to do, again, with difficult principles, and then the challenge of bringing the big players into Argentina, again, under a regulation which wants to be friendly, but it is a regulation. So there's a number of things you need to comply from forming a company in Argentina. You need to have capital in Argentina. You need to have manuals. You need to have people that deal with the public and with the regulator. You need to segregate your accounts. You need to have technology manuals and IT systems. So there's a number of things that you need to comply. However, under our model, we do not force you to operate in Argentina. So you can operate abroad with your Argentine company. You only need to have a local presence. But if you do have that, you have to promise us that we can also look at the international operations that in everything that has to do with Argentina. So you cannot close the door on us and tell us, no, that's a different company. So that's very important for us. And I think that's about it. But if you want to talk about anything else or tokenization, we can go into that.
If you want to talk about tokenization, that's right. Well, we are here in Debt Connect, so there are a lot of companies, protocols, and blockchains here in Argentina, and probably a lot of them, they probably consider to come to Argentina after that. So if you want to talk about the tokenization framework, we have time.
Yeah, I think regulation of VASP gave us a great insight and a great impulse. And so we didn't want to stop there. We said we should have a tokenization regime. And we couldn't pass a law because of the political situation, so we had to look at the existing framework. And the conclusion of the existing framework was that we can only, that every security in Argentina had to be issued in what's it called, certified form or book entry, and had to be deposited with our depository, which is called Caja de Valores. So that was a very difficult start because we killed native tokenization from the minute zero. So nonetheless, he said, we want to do this, and it came to us that we were able to create a digital representation which was simultaneous with the other representations. So we call tokenization the gender and the digital representation the species. What we have now is that a particular species in which we have a traditional security, let's call it tokenized security, being able to be also in the digital world. So, but the physical security exists. It is deposited with a depository. There's a holder of record. And then you can issue the digital representation, which can be up to 100%. So you can be totally in the digital world if you want, or you can have one feed on each world. And the digital representation only moves in the digital world. That is VASP, that register, be an exchange, a platform, whatever. And again, you can coexist on both worlds, and you can go back and forth as many times as you want. So initially, I would say, not ideally, We think there's going to be hybrid issuances in which we don't think anybody's going to go 100% digital from day one. We think people are going to issue more in the traditional market and eventually move into the digital market for secondary trading. That's at least what our expectations are on the discussions we've had with people, with actors of the sector. And we did it under a sandbox regime in which it's going to be a 1-year test. And after a year, we'll reevaluate how we did and whether we want to continue with the process or not, or we need to amend it. But it's essentially a 1-year sandbox test. And it's a sponsored project, so the issuer has to participate. And you have to participate with a different VASP, no more than 5, that of course have to be registered with CNB.
Well, we talk about the VASP registry, we talk about the tokenization framework, and what's next? That's the big question.
This time of the year, many people ask me, what if we look 2 years forward? And I say, what if we look 2 years back?
Well, yeah, 2 years
I would still be sitting in the law firm. I had no intention of becoming a regulator, no idea I would become one. So that's always a very tough and difficult exercise. But if we want to look forward, I think we do have the main regulations. That's a big advantage. We need to start having more subjects and more products on that, so that we need to consolidate. Eventually, one day, we need to think what's going to happen to decentralized actors and whether we'll bring them into the regulation or not. We don't have a definition. I think looking forward, we are going to need a few bit more definitions on what a virtual asset or crypto asset is. We have a clear definition now, and we use, like in the US, our definition of securities includes investment contracts. So we do apply how we test, although it's a foreign case law. But we do apply that, and with that in mind, our primary conclusion, although it's a case-by-case conclusion, is that most virtual assets are not included within our regulations. But that's not necessarily the case. Like the SEC, we have concluded, maybe we did before, but we have concluded that meme coins are not securities, that stable coins are not securities to the extent they don't pay any yield. So that's a few definitions, but maybe going forward, we need to make more definitions. We're going to take our time for that. And you might, of course, ask me about stable coins. And again, I just said stable coins are not under my jurisdiction, but eventually they could be under the jurisdiction of the central bank to the extent that the central bank concludes they are part of the payment system. But that's something in which eventually the central bank may come up with a regulation or not. We don't know that.
Well, we are running out of time, so I really want to say thanks for your participation and thanks for the work that the CNB are doing in Argentina. Well, in my personal opinion, I expect the next year will be the greatest year for Argentina, for capital markets, for tokenization, for exchanges, and for crypto. And again, thanks for the participation.
Okay, thank you, Diego. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy Buenos Aires.